Livestock areas located near forest edges, grasslands, or semi-wild regions are often directly affected by changes in the surrounding environment, as natural habitats gradually shrink due to expanding farmland and residential development. Food sources in the wild also decline. This causes wolves to expand their range in search of food closer to human settlements. Over time, they begin appearing more frequently around farms, small livestock areas, and places where leftover food is available. At first, these appearances are not very noticeable, but as the frequency increases, the pressure on livestock areas also grows over time. Signs of wolf activity become increasingly clear. At night or before dawn, they begin appearing near fences, livestock enclosures, or pathways around residential areas. Wolves move quickly and make very little noise before disappearing back into the darkness. On some occasions, they approach very close to livestock areas before quickly leaving when detecting unusual movement. Their repeated appearances gradually raise concern among local residents as the distance between wolves and human settlements continues to shrink. Wolves often travel along familiar routes such as trails, fence lines, or areas covered by vegetation to reduce the chance of being detected. However, their range of movement is not limited to narrow areas alone. While searching for food, they can still cross large open spaces if they sense a nearby food source. Their sharp awareness and ability to adapt quickly allow them to change direction flexibly depending on environmental conditions. Once they identify a favorable area, they often return repeatedly following the same habits. This behavior makes their movement patterns possible to monitor and predict after a period of practical observation. As the appearances continue repeatedly, control measures begin to be implemented instead of simply waiting. Hunters observe the movement routes and areas where wolves frequently appear in order to determine their primary range of activity. Trap systems are deployed across various types of terrain, such as trails, fence lines, and open areas within their movement range. During the setup process, bait is placed to increase the chance of attracting them closer. At the same time, hunters also prepare bows and arrows to provide support if necessary. Suitable hidden positions are selected to monitor the entire area without disturbing the surrounding environment. After the entire system is completed, the hunters maintain their distance and minimize noise within the area as much as possible. When night falls, the wolves begin appearing again along their familiar movement routes. Some approach the baited area and stop briefly to observe the surroundings before continuing forward. During their movement, they not only pass through narrow paths, but also cross wide open ground within their usual activity range. From hidden positions, the entire process is carefully monitored while waiting for the right moment. As the wolves move closer to the trap area, they step directly onto the calculated trigger point. The trap mechanism activates almost instantly once enough pressure is applied to the contact point. The entire process happens quickly, leaving little opportunity for reaction or changing direction. After the trap is triggered, the wolf is held immediately within the prepared area. The successful capture demonstrates that the deployment location matches both the wolves' actual movement routes and their familiar activity range. Controlling wolves is a process that requires time and patience rather than relying on a single action alone. When the entire process is maintained consistently and carried out properly, the ability to reduce risks to livestock and residential areas can improve significantly over time.
Losses exceeding $800,000 in a short period, enough to make any farmer hesitate. In just a few nights, entire flocks of poultry vanished, leaving behind cold, empty enclosures and chaotic traces scattered across the ground. No longer isolated incidents, this had become a series of coordinated attacks by wolves. As the damage continued to rise, many farms faced the risk of collapse. And a pressing question began to emerge: how would they fight back? At first, everything seemed like a minor nuisance. A few animals went missing, a few unfamiliar tracks appeared around the fences. But in a short time, the situation escalated rapidly. The predators began returning more frequently, following familiar paths, even identifying weaknesses in the protection systems. Some farms reported losing hundreds of animals in just 1 week. What was once a small issue had now turned into a full-blown crisis. Under mounting pressure, traditional defensive measures were immediately deployed. Fences were reinforced, protective nets were installed more densely, and warning devices were put into use. However, their effectiveness only lasted for a short time. The predators quickly adapted, changing their approach, even finding ways to bypass what seemed like the safest barriers. A true battle of wits began to take shape. When passive solutions were no longer enough, a more proactive approach was introduced: direct control through trapping. But this was far from an easy decision. The method has always been accompanied by intense debate over humaneness and safety. Some argue it is the only way to protect livelihoods, while others call for less controversial alternatives. Even so, in practice, control still had to be carried out. Experienced individuals began with observation. They did not set traps immediately but instead monitored signs, travel routes, footprints, and access points to water sources. From there, movement patterns gradually became clear. Trap locations were carefully selected, often along the routes most frequently used. The setup process was carried out with high precision. Traps were treated to minimize foreign scent, then buried just beneath the surface to avoid detection. Anchoring stakes were driven deep to ensure stability. Bait was placed strategically, often combining strong scents with natural cues to increase attraction. Every detail was carefully calculated, as even a small mistake could cause the entire plan to fail. Throughout the process, safety remained the top priority. Operators had to approach from the right direction, use gloves, and minimize leaving human traces. After traps were activated, regular inspections were required according to regulations to avoid unnecessary risks. This was not just a control activity, but a process demanding discipline and high responsibility. Over time, these efforts began to show results. The number of attacks gradually declined, and losses became more manageable. Some reports indicated a significant reduction in farm intrusions. At the same time, the number of participants in legal control efforts increased, showing that this was no longer an isolated effort but a coordinated system. As environments continue to change and wildlife adapts more rapidly, every method will need to evolve. Ultimately, the choice is not only about effectiveness, but also about how humans balance protecting livelihoods and maintaining ecosystems. If you were faced with this situation, what would you choose? A forceful solution to eliminate the risk immediately, or a softer approach that requires more time? Share your perspective, because this is not just the story of a single farm, but an issue spreading across many regions.